A review of Halo Cryptum by Greg Bear. First, to set a little context. In the video game Halo Combat Evolved, the holy immortal god emperor of Earth's United Nations Space Command controls a galaxy-spanning confederacy that's on the brink of outright civil war when, suddenly, aliens. A theocratic alliance of several species of space alien, the Covenant, embark on a crusade to exterminate the human race, making cryptic statements about how humans have blasphemed against their gods. The humans beat the Covenant like a drum in every ground engagement, but always get their asses whipped in space because the aliens have retardedly superior spaceships. To stop the aliens from finding the location of Earth, every retreating human ship has to take a mathematically random escape route. One ship, the Pillar of Autumn, does that, and winds up over 9,000 light years from any known part of the galaxy, and they find themselves staring at one of the greatest big dumb objects in video game history, the titular Halo. It's a big metal ring orbiting within the habitable zone of a gas giant, and its inner surface is covered in trees and shit, but no animals. That's important. It just so happens that one of the Pillar of Autumn's passengers is Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, last surviving Spartan. The Spartans are genetically engineered super soldiers who wear reactive-powered battle armor, a lot like the Space Marines in 40K. But the space government can only whip up one batch of Spartans at a time, and right now they're all dead except for the Master Chief. He goes down onto the Halo and kicks a lot of alien ass while the story unfolds in the background. Apparently the Halo is one of several built by the Forerunners, a race of super-intelligent aliens who mysteriously disappeared a bazillion years ago, and whom the Covenant now worship as gods. And the Halos were built as both research facilities and last-ditch superweapons. They contain something called the Flood. The Flood is an ancient biological superweapon that's sort of like the aliens from Aliens, except instead of using you as an incubator for their babbies, they turn you into the tank from Left 4 Dead. The Flood is hard to describe in brief, but makes perfect sense if you play the game. If containment procedures are compromised and the Flood gets out, the Halos will activate and extinguish all vertebrate life in the galaxy except for a couple of safe havens. And that's where the Forerunners went. Now, back to the book. While the video game and its corresponding novels are set a few centuries in the future, Cryptum is set 100,000 years in the past, shortly before the Flood gets out and the Forerunners nerf themselves to stop it. It follows the story of a young Forerunner who sneaks onto a human planet, pretty much the human planet set aside as a reservation after the end of a war between humans and Forerunners, to look for artifacts from an alien race even older than the Forerunners. He doesn't find any of those, but he does find a facility where an ancient and revered Forerunner has been chilling in stasis for a couple of thousand years, the titular Cryptum. Not sure of what else to do, he wakes Homeboy up and it turns out to be the Didact, pretty much the Forerunner Master Chief, leader of the Prometheans, who were sort of like the Forerunner Spartans. Now let me put this in perspective. In Halo, there are only a very few Spartans, but here there are quite a few Prometheans. And being the Didact means being the strongest, smartest, and all-around best super soldier in a world where super soldiers are a dime a dozen. So it's kind of a big deal. It plays out that the Flood first came to the galaxy during the Human Forerunner War, which the Forerunners won because of the Didact, and the humans were defeated so easily because they were trying to fight two enemies at once. The Didact and his wife, a biologist called the Librarian, had a plan for dealing with the Flood in a reasonable and sane way, But the Forerunner government liked the Halo plan better, so the librarian fucked off somewhere and the Didact got put in a box. Now the Flood has broken out again because a couple of high-ranking Forerunners wanted to keep some specimens for study instead of doing the smart thing and exterminating them, and the book ends with the galaxy poised on the brink of civil war and total extinction. All in all, the book was good. Not great, but good. I thought the writing style was pompous and fluffy, but I have no idea what good science fiction is supposed to sound like because I don't read much science fiction. A couple of times it seemed like the author forgot about events in the story just so he could have the main character end a chapter by asking a dramatic question, such as on page 278. Why would they need me if the Didact himself has been released and reinstated? It was the Didact himself, not the Council, who asked for you, dumbass. This turns out not to be true, but the reader doesn't know that at the time, so my point stands. It has the feel of whatever the exact opposite of dramatic irony would be. One of the biggest reasons I enjoyed this book, and why I love the whole Halo universe, is because it takes the Ancient Aliens paradigm and turns it completely on its head. My friend Charles coined a word for why he can't watch the History Channel anymore. Chronocentrism. The idea that humans in the past were so primitive and backwards and savage and unenlightened that the only possible way they could do great things like building pyramids, inventing agriculture, and founding civilizations was if space aliens came down from the sky and showed them how to do it. People are effectively denying their own heritage and greatness in order to make themselves feel superior to their supposedly primitive ancestors, and it pisses me off. But in the Halo universe, it's the opposite. The Forerunners built this super advanced galactic empire more efficient than a beehive, and yet a bunch of squishy pink humans were able to defeat the enemy that drove them to extinction. And not just once, but twice. And it's clearly shown in one of the other Halo novels, either The Flood or Contact Harvest, I can't quite remember, that humans are only technologically behind the Covenant because our civilization is younger. We have better brains, and given an equal playing field time-wise, we would be the ones on top. The Covenant engineers are good at taking things apart and putting them together better than they were before, but they can't really invent anything. When a Covenant elite points out to a Prophet that the Master Chief has better armor than he does, the Prophet accuses him of blasphemy because his armor is based on the old Forerunner design. So human beings were able to invent something better than what the Forerunners used, and essentially do it in a vacuum and in less time. It just makes me very happy that at least one fantasy universe isn't subscribing to the lie that a race or culture older than your own must by definition be better and more enlightened. This makes me happy inside. In conclusion, I like this book. It's not great, but it's good. The style of writing is a bit pompous and fluffy, and that can be off-putting, but the story is interesting and engaging enough that it more than makes up for it. I give it a 7 out of 10, and recommend it if you're into that sort of thing.